Guitar Business Radio is the podcast for the business of guitar, where you'll always get no reviews, no demos, and no idle chatter. From players to CEOs and in between. If you have a professional or business connection to the world of guitar, this show is your window to insight and information you won't get anywhere else. I'm Jeffrey D. Brown, and I approve this message. So let's get to it. From Guitar Business Media, welcome to the 76th episode of GBR. So as we start our next block of 75 shows, I want to thank all of you for helping to make Guitar Business Radio the success that it is today, a year and a half later. Our audience continues to grow with every new episode we produce, and we continue to attract the kind of high-quality guests on the show that really contribute to that effort. A great example is today's guest on the show, Jol Dantzig. This is certainly one of the most articulate and in-depth interviews we've done, and if you're a fan of Jol's work, you're going to find out a lot that you didn't already know. And if you've only heard the name or a few fleeting facts about him, I strongly encourage you to listen to the full interview. You'll likely get a lot out of it. We'll get to that in just a quick moment. But first, here's a quick reminder about our new Facebook group, aptly called the Guitar Business Group. It's run by the GBR team. It's a closed group, so you have to answer a couple of questions to join. And it's not for everybody. You have to have a clear-cut business or professional involvement in the world of guitar. But if that's you, we'd love to have you in the group. Still pretty new, but we continue to add members on a regular basis. And if you'd like to be a part of our official GBR Facebook group, well, just search on Facebook for Guitar Business Group. Should come right up. And while you're looking us up on Facebook and pondering your next move, it's once again time for us to move on to something completely different. So my guest on GBR today is Jol Dantzig. His 4-decade career started off in the vintage guitar business, which ultimately evolved into Hamer guitars in the late 70s, early 80s. But his career has taken him on a creative pathway that, in addition to his well-known work as a guitar builder, includes motorsports, advertising design, marketing, consulting work, and much more. And although he's been back in the guitar building business for some time now, you'll see that his overall career is connected to some common threads. Again, there's a lot here, so let's just get to it. As Jol Dantzig joins us right here and right now. Hey, Jol. I want to thank you for taking some time out of what I think is probably a pretty busy, but even probably more so interesting schedule to join us here today. Welcome to GBR.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Almost in person. Sounds like it.
Almost.
So I'm going to do something a little bit different today as we begin our next 75 shows, since we just finished 75. So
why not? 75.
Yeah. So, start of another block of 75. I'm actually going for 100, which will probably come up around the time of Winter NAMM, when this last year I did the 50th episode with Jennifer Batten, and that was turned out to be the golden first anniversary episode. So that was the NAMM episode. And then the 75th, which was last week, turned out to be the official Summer NAMM episode, which didn't mean much, but, something I could say about it. But I'm going to start off a little differently today, with sort of today being the operative word. I think there's a lot of people in the guitar universe who at least know the name Jol Dantzig, whether it was from, the early association with Hamer and going forward, or something completely different. But I think to start off, if you don't mind, what I'd like to do is just begin with two very simple questions. Who is Jol Dantzig, and what does Jol Dantzig do? How does that work?
Well, my standard answer is as little as possible.
But, I don't know. Somehow I'm not believing that too much, but, I think there's probably a lot there. So we'll take that at face value.
No, but I think that has to do more with my philosophy of trying to streamline things, trying to make things as efficient as possible. And I'm not really lazy, but I just don't like all the extra work of putting myself through all kinds of hoops just to get something done. So
and that, you sort of touched on something that I've read from you, which I think of as just simplicity. Simplicity seems to be something that's big in your life and your work, and I really appreciate that. Something I've talked about from time to time. So that sounds consistent with what I've seen so far.
Yeah, when I first started playing guitar, things were very simple, and I kind of like it that way. You have a guitar, you've got maybe one or two pickups, or maybe three. You plug it into an amplifier, and then you work with it. You work with, you learn to manipulate the instrument, and you learn finger control. You learn hand technique, and don't have to rely on a lot of effects. And I feel the same way with everything that I do. Strip it down to its bare essentials, and then just add things here and there for color.
That makes an awful lot of sense. Maybe too much sense for some people, but because they're obsessed with complexity, because that makes them maybe feel good that they've done something complicated. But maybe I used to think that way too, but not anymore.
Well, I have nothing against people who want to use plugins, or they want to use a lot of effects pedals or something like that. I don't have anything against that. It's just not for me. And it's gotten me into some trouble design-wise over the years, because I would build guitars for people to be able to plug directly into an amplifier, and it would sound great. And then more recently, I've seen more and more people using guitars that I thought were kind of crap, like Jaguars and Jazzmasters and Harmonies, and the gold foil pickups.
Sure.
Low output, not a lot of character, not a lot of balls to it, and I couldn't figure it out for a while. And then I realized that the lower output, the cleaner character, the less character you have, the more you have to work with your effects pedals.
Sure.
And it's in one respect, it's kind of reducing the guitar to a game controller.
Yeah, I was going to say controller. That's right.
And which is fine, because there are people who are doing amazing things and getting great sounds. So I had to, much like the older generation when I was young, didn't understand things like distortion. They didn't, we had a guy come in the studio, the father of a studio owner. It was in a storefront down in the basement, and he was kind of an audiophile and a ham radio operator kind of guy. Comes running down screaming, "Oh, your amplifiers are making square waves. Oh, there's so much harmonic distortion." And we're like, yeah, exactly.
And the point is,
yeah. And, to his ear, it was horrible. He wanted to stop it. He just walked out shaking his head. But we thought, wow, well, we sound just like the Yardbirds or something,
Right.
But I digress here. So to me, I was, for a little while, I struggled with the whole concept of making a guitar that was bland enough to work with all of your pedals. But now I understand it, and I've made some adjustments in what I do to accommodate cleaner sounds, and without giving up the character that a lot of us really look for in a guitar when you plug it in and you can play it just by itself. And so it just made my guitars a little more, I guess, versatile.
And I've watched a number of the demos of your current models that you're producing. Lots of people talk about fabulous sustain and just good basic stuff. And the guitars are beautiful guitars, but they're not complicated. From my view, it was something I noticed even before I recognized that this kind of simplicity mantra was part of you. That was apparent, but I can see what you're talking about.
Well, I'm a big fan of the Les Paul Jr. And Esquire, Telecaster, very simple guitars. When When pressed, yeah, Stratocaster, one of my favorite guitars. And, but those are still simple guitars.
Right.
Even a Strat only has, one volume control. But, I do build guitars with 2 volumes and 2 tones. Is it necessary? Well, there are some things that you can do that you can't do with one tone control. Most of the designs that I did at Hamer only had a single tone control. And I don't know, I guess there's 2 sides to it. Some people said, well, I don't have the option of changing the tone on each pickup, presetting it or on the fly. And then on the other hand, you could say that, well, now you only have to mess with one control. It's a lot quicker. So, there are pros and cons to everything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it brings up an interesting point. And I'm sort of curious as we kind of maybe wander back in time a little bit, to what degree when you were, when Hamer was in its early days and you were creating new kinds of instruments, my sense was always that the company and you as part of that and whoever else made a difference in the industry, that there was influence there that really made a mark, and I'm wondering what, if you remember back in those days, your thinking was, and was there any similarity, even if in an early state at that point, that applied to what you were doing then compared to where you're at years later now?
Well, in a lot of ways, I think it's come full circle. But in the very beginning, we were vintage guitar dealers. We were musicians. We were playing in bands, and my partner Paul and I were playing in bands, and we just found that the older guitars worked better. They seemed to be cooler, and they just had a sound that we're talking the early 70s.
Right.
A brand new Gibson guitar just didn't have the sound that a 50s Gibson did.
Mm-hmm.
And we were selling a lot of vintage guitars to well-known musicians, rock stars, or whatever you want to call it, a lot of English bands, mm-hmm. American bands as well, and having good success hunting down the old guitars and then selling them to performers.
And that's quite a list too. I've seen it.
Oh yeah,
quite impressive.
There were a handful of people in the United States who were doing that. Mm-hmm. And when you came to Chicago, it was a pretty big market. So a lot of bands came through, and we'd go down to whatever the venue was and just, waltz backstage with some Lifton cases and, tweed amplifiers and say, "Hello, Mr. Beck. Would you be interested in this?" And usually they did. It was, they're bored. Their day, consisted of traveling in a van or something, and then checking into a hotel and ordering room service. So when somebody shows up with a tweed twin and a 57 Gold Top, of course you're gonna.
Now, how was access? Did you have any problem getting that access at the time? How'd you do that?
Well, after a while, it was pretty remarkable because the security wasn't what it is today.
Yeah.
And, we just learned the art of looking like you belong where you are. And and a lot of times we would, we had the code cracked for they're playing this venue, so they're probably staying at one of these 2 hotels. And then you just call there and you go, "Yes, I'd like to speak to Mr. Simmons, please." And they would connect you to Kim Simmons' room, and we'd say, "Hi, we've got some vintage guitars down in the lobby. Interested?" And that was usually all it took. But getting back to our philosophy when we first started making guitars, it was born out of necessity, really. We thought that the vintage trade was, the guitars were getting more expensive. We didn't think that people would continue to pay that kind of money for it. And and married with the idea that I wanted a guitar that you couldn't get at the time. I was playing bass and I wanted a Flying V bass, and you couldn't get that. So we endeavored to actually make one. And we'd hooked up with a repair guy who was doing a lot of repair for us named John Montgomery, who was, in addition to doing band instruments and repadding saxophones and that sort of thing, he was very good with woodworking and stains and that sort of thing. So it took a long time to make that first instrument, but, we made it down in John's basement. And at that point, really hadn't thought about making guitars as our vocation. We weren't looking to become a brand. And I just wanted to use it myself. I just wanted to play a cool guitar that nobody else had. And in the meantime, we had, I'm going to back up a little bit. We had become, I think, one of the first warranty service centers outside of Kalamazoo for Gibson. And we had gone up to the Kalamazoo factory a number of times, to tour it and to get some background and see what was available, learn some techniques, and just become better repair people. And we were buying a lot of our supplies straight from Gibson, full fingerboards, rosewood fingerboards with crown inlays, the frets in them already and binding on them. You could just slap it on a guitar.
They would sell those to you?
Because we were.
That's right, you were authorized.
Warranty center.
Right, that's right.
Warranty center.
Sure.
I still have the catalog. It's like a big black binder from Gibson with all the stuff in it. And, SG tail pieces, J200 pick guards, all this stuff.
I guess that would be a museum piece too, of some sort, or maybe a Smithsonian or something.
Well, I'm sure there's a few of them.
Yeah. Okay.
And we were buying lacquer and shader toners, all the cherry colors you need, brown colors for tobacco. And one of our trips up to Kalamazoo, we were introduced to the head of artist relations, and his name escapes me now, but he worked for Gibson, and later, actually, when I worked at Fender, he was working at Fender as well, and we had to work together. But at the time, he was, he seemed much older. He was like old school, more jazz guitarist sort of guy, and we were saying, you really should reintroduce the 59 Les Paul Standard, with the flame top and the patent applied for humbuckers. They really sound great and they look great, and they work for rock music now. And the guy actually said, we have guys with college degrees in marketing to figure this sort of stuff out. So thank you very much. No. And so I'm thinking, the most expensive Gibson guitar that you could buy, at least a solid body guitar, is a Les Paul Custom, which was $650 at the time.
Yeah, I remember that.
And we had just sold, I don't know, some big rock star a 58 Les Paul Standard for $2,600. So
and this was in the early 70s, so that was quite a bit.
Multiples of. We're talking about a 15-year-old guitar where we sold for multiples of what they can get for their most expensive Les Paul. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with this picture? These guys obviously don't understand what's going on. They don't know the market. And, it wasn't like the light came on and we thought, well, we should make our own guitar company. But I think it was things like that just kind of reassured us that, they just don't seem to want to go in this direction, and we're doing okay. And once I had built the bass, it just seemed like a, pretty simple thing to make some other guitar. So we made an Explorer style guitar. A buddy of ours who had a shop in Chicago, Wood Music, a guy named Jim Beach, and he was really a talented guitar builder, and he had made some Explorer copies. So we had bought a couple of those from him that hadn't been painted yet. They were just in raw wood, and we added a maple top and put some binding on it and gave it a sunburst finish. And actually, one of those wound up with Rick Nielsen in the early Cheap Trick days, and that was the guitar that he became associated with. And
now, were these copies of the of the Gibson design at that time?
Well, they were a little bit different in that we rounded, once we got them from Jim, we started rounding the corners off and making it look, just to kind of give it a little different look.
Right.
And, we didn't think anything. We weren't trying to make counterfeit Gibsons.
Right.
It was just that, very few people had seen an Explorer at that point. And we knew they were super rare, and we knew a couple people who had them. But we weren't interested in, it was never the idea to make a Gibson counterfeit. The idea was always to make some sort of inspired by kind of custom design, something that, had our own aesthetic and the things that we liked. And we liked the Les Paul Standard, the Sunbursts, and had owned many of them. So it was kind of like let's take the cool things about this guitar and the cool things about that guitar and put them together and make something kind of different, new. And it just was something, to be honest, in the very beginning, it was something that we would take to the shows along with the vintage guitars, and thinking, well, this will give our enterprise a little bit more cachet with the touring musicians. Hey, look, see, here's something really cool that you might like to look at, not even thinking that they would buy them. Were you
calling them were you calling them Hamers in those days or not yet?
Well, in the beginning, they weren't called Hamer. They just said nothing.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
So once we got an order, I think I took it to show to Andy Powell, who actually I still know to this day. He lives actually not too far from here. And because he played Flying V's, and I thought, wow, he might be interested in this. So, and I have a picture of him playing it backstage at a Wishbone Ash concert that we brought it to. And he wasn't really interested. He liked it, but he wasn't interested in it. He's more into the Flying V's. And but the bass player, Martin Turner, looked at it and said, "Can you make a bass like this?" And I was with, Paul Hamer, and he kind of looked at me, and I just turned to Martin and said, "Sure, of course we can." Because he was playing Thunderbirds, the '60s Thunderbirds, and getting an incredible sound. And I said, "Yeah. Oh, yeah, we could do that." And he said, "Okay, but I want it like this. Can you make it black, but with a little bit of metal flake in it, like a starry sky?" "Oh, yeah, sure. And, we could put the Thunderbird pickups on it and a Thunderbird, it'll play just like your Thunderbird, but it'll look really cool." "Okay, great. If you make it, I'll buy it."
This was the Explorer shape that?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So it was like an Explorer Thunderbird mashup, which, of course, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And we got outside, and Paul goes, "Why the hell did you tell him that? We don't know how to make a bass." And I said, but at that point, I'd had a long history of working in shops, motorcycle shops, machine shops, electronics it's all kinds of stuff. And making stuff is something that I just did. And I said, we will figure it out. Between me and Monty, we'll figure out how to do it. And I was already thinking, we'd use an Epiphone, the Epiphone bass. They had a double cutaway. It was like the cornet guitar, but it was the bass version. I forget what they call it. But it had all the T-Bird hardware on it, the pickups and the bridge. We'll just use one of those as a donor for all the hardware, and we'll just build one. And at that point, it started to seem like, well, okay, maybe this could be good. We could do this. This would really augment what we were doing in the vintage trade, and it would make our shop stand out, and we could make some money, do some cool stuff. And that was really the beginning of it.
So it was just basses, right, initially?
Well, it was mainly guitars.
Okay,
the first two were basses, but we built the one, or I should say, we modified the one that Jim made, and Rick Nielsen got that one. And he was just, he was in a local band called Cheap Trick. They were just playing the same circuit as my band was. And Rick was a friend that we knew. But we started selling the guitars. We started running an ad in Guitar Player magazine, like a little black and white ad. And continued to go to the shows, and we sold one to Martin Barr of Jethro Tull. We sold one to Mick Ralphs of Bad Company. We made a bass for Boz Burrell, who was the bass player for Bad Company. And, Rick Derringer, a lot of people that we dealt with were these, touring acts. And once we started showing them guitars, we started getting orders for them. Right. And at that point, we decided, okay, well, maybe we should really get serious about this and, give it a name and everything. And I remember calling a little meeting. I had a Volkswagen bus. And everybody in the back of the bus.
Yeah, I had one of those too.
Yeah.
71, I think, is what it was.
Yeah, same, like the second version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And
with a big sunroof, you could open up the whole top of the.
Yeah, mine didn't have that. That's cool, the sunroof.
Yeah. Hand crank, of course, no electric sunroofs.
Very analog. Very analog.
So you had the meeting,
Yeah, just had, I think this is going to go. We should make a guitar company and try to make a go of it. We've got these big names playing it, and that's, I don't see any reason why we couldn't make a few of these things every month. And, it's an income stream. We could do some cool stuff, and it makes our shop more important to the touring musicians. And, it's all word of mouth. Hey, where'd you get that guitar? Oh, there's this place in Chicago that we buy vintage guitars from, and they make them there. And then we just figured it would just increase the business all the way around. And it was fun. It was cool. We were doing something different, something that these other guys weren't doing. And I love to make stuff. So in that regard, it just ticked all those boxes. It was a guitar. It was cool. It was vintage inspired. The guys at Gibson told me that, that's not a good idea. So, of course, immediately I wanted to do it. And so it was just, it would just seem perfect. And then, of course, not too long after that, it took about 2 years, maybe 2-3 years. And then Cheap Trick got a record contract, and they started becoming well known. And his notoriety, Rick Nielsen's notoriety, really kind of eclipsed everything we were doing. I mean, we had huge Bad Company. It doesn't get much bigger than that.
Right,
Jethro Tull was huge. Wishbone Ash, their first gig was in front of 30,000 people. I mean, so all these guys, Jan Ackerman, we had done business with him. Michael Schenker, all these guys. So it was, Rick Nielsen was, we thought he was great. We thought Cheap Trick was an amazing band, and for sure that they were going to, make waves. But once they really took off, they kind of eclipsed all the stuff that we had done before. And we really kind of got a reputation for being the guys who made those wacky guitars for Rick Nielsen. And that was just an outgrowth of, the motorcycle and race car kind of head that I had, doing wacky stuff like, hey, can you make a guitar with 5 necks on it? Sure.
And you did.
Yeah. Actually, I think it was a one-upmanship thing. Can you make one with 3 necks? How about 4? Well, how about 5?
Well, did you go right to 5? Is that what it was? Or did you make doubles or triples or things like that?
No, we went straight to 5 on that project. And we would have gone to 6, but it turns out that it'd be so big you couldn't reach the bottom one. Not that would have stopped Nielsen, but it just didn't seem practical, if you can imagine.
And did you take it into the shows?
5 necks is practical, 6 necks is not.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if I'm trying to remember if I saw him with it or not. I certainly knew about it, but in passing. But did he go on stage with it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's what
It's at the Met in New York right now, and that show with Clapton's SG, the Fool SG, and Eddie's Frankenstein and Muddy Waters Telecaster, and all just all that good stuff there. And there's that 5 neck.
That's awesome.
And actually, when it first came out, it started causing so much noise. People just thought it was so ludicrous and so crazy. It started gaining this huge reputation, and it eclipsed everything that we were trying to do in that kind of vintage. This is a really great handmade custom guitar that you can buy today that's as good as a vintage guitar. That was our whole spiel. But when these crazy looking Rick Nielsen guitars came out, it started to eclipse that. Because, I mean, obviously, how do you miss a bright orange 5-neck guitar? It shows up in magazines, and that became our reputation. And for a while, we were kind of, at least I was kind of put off by it. It's like, hey, I'm trying to do something kind of cool and serious here. And then this kind of cartoon character guitar is the one that's getting all the attention. It's like you have a novelty single or something, and that's what you're known for. It was really rewarding, and it was also kind of frustrating. But, in hindsight, I mean, now it's been displayed at the Smithsonian. It's been at a number of museums, including right now it's at the Met. So I can't really argue with that.
Does it, to go back a little bit to my earlier question, today in the present, is your name associated with that guitar as Jol Dantzig as well as Hamer, differently than it was, 40 years ago or 30 years ago, whatever it was?
Yeah, I think the way the whole industry has moved is there's a lot more emphasis on the people behind the brand names. Mm-hmm. I think, whether it's the Fender custom shop, the current crop of master builders, people know who they are. They might have their favorite that they like, or, or knowing, Paul Smith at PRS, or.
Well, we had a couple of the original guys on, as you know, Mike Stevens and John
Mike
Page.
Stevens, sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, guys like Mike Eldred and Mike Shannon, were at Charvel Jackson and later the Fender custom shop. Like people want to know those people. They're starting to appreciate the names of the people who were the driving force behind the company rather than just the brand itself. I think even, obviously at Fender, whether or not that happens at Gibson now, I mean, there's the Murphy guitars, and there's certain people who worked in the Gibson custom shop, Gene Baker,
right? Oh, sure.
People like that who've been associated with Gibson. With the new regime at Gibson, we'll see if the new boss is just the old boss, or if they start to shine a light a little bit on more of the people who make it happen.
Well, there's a lot of light being shown on them right now. It's a whole another topic which we don't necessarily need to get into, but
no.
But so going back, not to digress, but how did things transpire in terms of the market for Hamer? Were there some things that you did that from that, as we say, we get a little bit into the business and say the marketing side of it, which I know you know something about. Was there anything that you guys did that was different, that really made a difference, that worked in bringing the brand further down the road?
Well, I think that what really helped was that we were in touch with the artists and knowing what the artists wanted, because we had been selling them the vintage gear for quite some time, and we would go on the stages, and and there wasn't so much of that happening even at the big companies. Another generation was running those companies, so obviously somebody like the Rolling Stones or the Who, when they got that big, the big companies couldn't ignore them. But I think that it was kind of a point in time where one generation had lost touch of what the new music was, and a new generation was coming up. And we were part of that new generation who played Les Pauls and Strats through two Marshall stacks and played rock.
Right.
And so we had that kind of edge, and we advertised it that way. And we approached, our attitude in the very beginning was, we're just going to sell to pros, because the guy on the street, we'd show him a guitar for $1,200 and they'd go, that's nuts. I can go get a brand new Gibson for half of that. And the truth of the matter was that we were selling to rock stars who were paying twice that for a vintage guitar. So we always looked at it as we were selling a guitar. Our concept was, this is a vintage style guitar that can stand with a vintage guitar, sounds as good, plays as good, and has a certain, vibe to it that would appeal to a guy who played vintage guitars or was interested in a vintage guitar. But it was priced reasonably compared to a vintage guitar. Now, that price was more than a brand new guitar, but we were not interested in going into stores and dealing with, distributors and that whole thing. So we didn't have to compete in the guitar stores. We were just going directly to professionals and advertising that way. People would call us and order a guitar. And we did these things we called them salons, so where we would go to New York with 5 or 6 guitars in flight cases, and we'd stay at a hotel, get a hotel suite. And everybody who had, in the region, who had sent for a catalog or approached us for more information, we would send out invitations to come down and look at the stuff at the hotel and try it out with an amp. And so we did one in LA, we did one in Houston, we did one in New York. And we're very much centered on getting to the players.
Was anybody doing that at that time? Anybody else?
Well, like a lot of these things, people have similar ideas at the same time because of the time frame and
what I'm talking about,
what's happening. But
doing those salons.
I don't know. I've never.
Well, it seems
I've
like
never really heard of it, but
I mean, it's later on. I've seen more and more of those things, but more what I would consider recent times. Was there a point where the market sort of caught up to what you were doing, and it wasn't so odd to, the pricing wise to be doing what you were doing? I can't quite remember when I was really familiar. I'd become familiar with the Hamer brand. I honestly can't remember whether it was in the later 70s or whether it was in the 80s sometime. So,
I think probably in the mid 80s. Paul Smith came on the scene with, we're very much the same sort of thing that we were doing, kind of a
85 or so.
Yeah, hybrid sort of thing. And, there were more small builders coming up. You'd go to the NAMM show and there would be, 1 or 2 guys with a new, there was Travis Bean and there was SD Curley.
Oh, sure. Geez, I haven't heard those names in a while.
Yeah. So, and Gibson, after a while, came out with, they reintroduced the Flying V and the Explorer, and then they came out with, they put humbuckers on the Les Paul standard, big humbuckers instead of mini buckers. And, so we started to see a change probably in the late 70s, early 80s. And then by the mid 80s, I think there was a lot more of that going on. It wasn't that out of the ordinary. And I think by then I was actually kind of bored with it.
Were you going to the NAMM show at some point at all, or?
Yeah, we went to our first one, I think, in 77 or 78. It was out at Disneyland. It was at a Disneyland hotel, I think.
Yes, it was, because I know our company in those days, PMP, was primarily a publisher, but we had a couple of years of exhibiting out there. I remember one year we exhibited in the parking garage, where they had to move into the underground garage, and they set it up for displays, and that was a weird thing.
It was outgrowing the NAMM show. That was the first summer NAMM, I think, and it started to outgrow the hotel, and then eventually it moved into the Anaheim Convention Center and got much bigger. But yeah, we did that. I think we shared a booth with DiMarzio or something. We knew Larry since just about day one out there, so, and Larry was making the pickups that we used in our guitars very early on.
Right, okay.
Now, I had managed to get some real patent applied fors from Gibson. They were in the reject bin, or, people would send their guitars in to have them updated or cleaned up, and they had scratched chrome, so they'd take the pickups out. Oh, I want those new pickups, redo everything. And they just take the old pickups out and throw them in a box, and they would have a big box full of discarded pickups. And some of them worked and some of them didn't. And we just took the whole box. So in the beginning, we had a bunch of patent applied for humbuckers to put in our guitars. But at a certain point, we were going to run out of those. So Steve Blucher, who worked for Larry DiMarzio, who really I worked with to design a patent applied for style pickup that we could get on a regular basis. We didn't have to tear apart Gibson guitars. So that was an interesting change. So, the whole thing was happening, like a lot of young builders and a lot of young business people were coming up, and the aftermarket, Seymour Duncan as well, about the same time.
Yeah. Lots of stuff happening then. We're now, into the mid 80s, and not too much longer after that, the company gets sold.
Yeah, 88.
Yeah. What 88. Can you tell us, kind of what led up to that? What were some of the milestones that got you to that? What sort of facilitated that? What was the thinking behind it? I mean, I've been involved in a few of those kinds of things, but I think that would be interesting to hear.
Well, we'd grown the business, but not at a small cost. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that you have to get together, and it's expensive. And the music industry hasn't been a linear thing. It wasn't like it started here and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. There was a lot of ebb and flow, especially in the guitar world, up and down, up and down. It was not easy to grow a small guitar company, and it's the same today. It's
exactly.
So it was never easy. It was never like we were making a ton of money.
Right.
We were plowing a lot of it back into the company. I had put up, considerable amount of equity, and my partner, had taken on a third partner at that point, and he had invested quite a bit of money in the business. And so, there was debt that had to be serviced, and it was growing and growing, and there were disagreements between the partners about how we should proceed. And I think at that point, it really came down to one of the partners was like, well, we should just shut it down. And, I wasn't interested in losing a huge amount of money. So I thought there was an alternative to it. And, and it came up to a vote, and one of the partners got voted down. And then there was a big squabble, and the gag order is still in effect, so I can't really talk about it.
I understand. No, that's
it came, to a parting of the ways with one of the founding members, with Paul Hamer, and so in effect we had to buy out. We were stressed financially to begin with, and in effect we had to buy out one of the partners. So, we needed to find, and he was the guy who was in charge of the sales department. And so we needed to find another way to sell our guitars to, jump into the void. And so we looked for distribution. And I knew Bill Kaman, and Kaman Music was the biggest distributor of musical instruments and musical accessories in the country. And they had international branches, and it was very cool. And Bill is a very cool guy, and he was way into vintage guitars. And so we approached him about distributing the guitars, and that would just take the sales thing right off of us.
Right.
And then I could concentrate on designing and building guitars, and the other partner, Frank Untermeyer, he really ran the front end. He ran the business, and did the purchasing, did all the books, and and ran the day-to-day in the company. He was the guy who ran the office. And so we just needed to fill that sales gap, and Kaman looked like a good bet. And that went okay for a little while. And then, when you're a sales organization and distribution, and you don't actually make anything, if sales go down of the latest widget that you have, the first thing they do is they go, well, let's give a big discount and people will buy more, so
right.
That's their strategy. It's and when you you can burn a brand down to the ground, and then you just go, oh, well, okay. You just kind of wipe off your hands and you go, okay, what else is out there that we can distribute? What's the next big thing?
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that Bill Kaman felt that way. He certainly didn't. But, there were 80 salespeople at Kaman just in the United States, the DSMs, the district sales managers.
Yep.
And, so they started, they're more used to selling strings and picks and kazoos and guitar stands and that sort of stuff, drum thrones.
This wasn't before Ovation, was it? Or
no, they had Ovation as well, but
right.
they were in the process of doing the same thing to Ovation and wound up happening to, you don't see them around anymore. But, it's the whole sales thing. It started becoming driven by sales, and it was like, we need a Jackson guitar. We need a guitar that's like the Jackson because they're on the cover of Guitar Player magazine and they're hot. It's like, okay, you want a Jackson? I'll make a Jackson. So I designed a guitar called the Californian, which was kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference to my friends at Charvel Jackson. And, I just made it like if Ferrari made a shred guitar, what would it look like? So I came up with that, and it's, this is great. We need a cheaper one. It's like, okay, that's what salespeople say. Now if they were cheaper, we could sell more of them. And
it always says what some external thing will make my job easier. It's
exactly.
not about how can I be a better salesperson or how can we be more effective. It's how can something else make it easier for us. So
yeah, and I'm not saying that we as Hamer, what was left of the core group, are faultless, or that I was faultless at the time. I have plenty of missteps and things that we shouldn't have done.
As we all do.
Yeah, exactly. And, but we're just trying to put food on the table. And I was trying to still do cool stuff. And, it got to a point with me that, then they brought in the import line and talking to the business, it was like such a straightforward conversation. It's like, well, what will we name the import line? And the salespeople, a marketing guy was like, well, we're going to name it Hamer. And I said, well, doesn't that kind of kill the main brand here? We're trying to be an upscale professional guitar, and you're going to come out with a cheap guitar that has the same name. It's going to confuse people, especially because you're going to go into different markets and lower end stores. He goes, no. We need that halo. We need that Hamer halo. We need that glow to shine down on the lower priced guitars. And I was like, well, look, okay, let's just take automotive because I know automotive. Okay, you've got Honda. It's the low end. Acura. Okay, you've got Toyota. Their high end is Lexus.
Right.
Nissan. Their high end is
Infinity.
It's like Fender, Squier, Gibson, Epiphone. This is not rocket science, guys. It's like, people know that it's, the subsidiary or the entry level brand. And that gives you people who are aspirational to get the real thing. They can get that and then they can move up if they understand the tie-in. So when whoever goes on stage with, Pearl Jam or whatever goes on stage with Hamer, that's what shines on the lower brand, not the name on the headstock necessarily. It's people, guitar players are not completely stupid. They get that, but it makes buying the upscale brand more desirable because that's the upscale version. But there's no shame in the lower line, but you don't just put the same name on everything. And anyway, there were conversations like that. And after a while, I was just like, okay, that's enough. I'm out of here.
When was that? When did you bail?
The early 90s.
Okay. All right.
And, it was just like one too many arguments that, seemed, I could have imagined stuff like this happening at many guitar companies or many different kinds of businesses. And, that was the beginning, the jumping of the shark, I guess, and
Now, is this when you got up and moved to California, or do I?
Yeah. I moved to San Francisco area and got involved in. I was doing all the advertising and all of the publication, all the newsletters and everything, the desktop publishing.
And you're a designer too. I mean, you.
Yeah, I have a graphic design and an art background. I went to school for that stuff, and it was just more cost effective, and also we could retain more control over. We wouldn't, in my eyes, we wouldn't make the mistakes of that a big corporation that was out of touch or was just purely trying to sell a bunch of guitars and then move on to the next thing. We wouldn't do those things. Try to have some sort of integrity. So it was a way for us to control. So when I left, I said, look, I'll still do your advertising. I can still do your artist relations. I can still do your newsletters because that's what I'm going to be concentrating on. So I went out there and got involved in that and did work for Nady, and I did a lot for Mesa Boogie. I was at Mesa Boogie like 2 days a week, just hanging out in the factory, hanging out with Randy Smith and all the guys in the shop, and Jim Ashow.
You were really well connected for the most part, and so you were staying in the industry that you knew pretty well, and you had a line to a lot of clients there.
Yeah, and with the people who had grown up in the industry along with us, like Rob Turner at EMG, they were a client of mine as well. And then I got into the internet and doing websites, and
sounds like a familiar track as you and I talked about. That's so I haven't had to hire any graphics people or web designers or people like that for 20 years.
And people usually say to me, "Wow, you were in San Francisco in the early '90s doing websites and doing that. How come you're not a billionaire?" And I usually say, "I'm just lucky, I guess."
I was I don't know. Maybe you might even remember this at that time, because in the early about 1993, maybe which was kind of really when the web was starting to go slightly past text and hyperlinks and that sort of thing. I was one of the publishers of a little magazine called Online Design. And it was right at the cusp. I mean, it was like right at the time where they were talking about mostly the reference, even though you'd think it would be about internet, was about electronic design and, all the things that were being done in, like you say, desktop publishing and that sort of thing. But it was more appropriate as the internet started to take off, and it was a beautiful magazine that the guys most of them were up in that area. So that lasted for a couple of years. And that was an interest. I remember a lot of things from that time. I can't really have that, and I'm sure you do too, that reference point to where the internet was coming alive. And it seemed really interesting, and and yet as we look back, it was so primitive in those days.
Yeah, but it was a lot of fun. At one point we were I had some partners who were down in San Jose, and they were actually building the Grateful Dead's website, and they were serving it off a Sun Microsystems machine in the office, in our office.
I remember those.
And so it was very exciting. And then I started getting diversifying into, motorsports and motorcycles and race cars and stuff are one of my passions. And I started diversifying into the automotive group. And then we approached people like, we went to SEMA show.
Oh, sure.
And, got Yokohama and Goodyear, Firestone. And, we registered a lot of domain names like Ferrari.com. And
isn't it amazing when you think back of the money that, you could get in those days for building websites?
Oh, yeah, it was amazing. $10,000 and it was junk. Yeah. But I mean, it was hard, it was a lot of work, it was.
Oh, yeah, it was kludgy and clumsy compared to today. But the market is, except if you're doing big enterprise level stuff, the market, has obviously changed a million times, so it's not the same.
And an interesting thing that relates back to the guitar industry is that, listen up, guitar builders. It's the same thing. We've realized that in the beginning, it's all about the content. People who have content are the ones who are doing the distribution, and they're making they're at the bleeding edge, and they're making it happen. And then at a certain point in every industry, it's not really about the content, the people who make the content. I mean, at the Netflix level, people who make the content are probably making a good living. But for the most part, all the people on the internet who are making content, their rig rundowns and their pedal demos and stuff, they're making some money, but the money's not there. The money is in the, selling stuff. It's
not in podcasting, by the way, for the most part.
Really, I was thinking about getting into that.
Oh, you have to, I mean, at this level, at the very highest levels, yes. And I mean, it's exploding, as you probably know. But you have to kind of look at it as having a book or doing a speaking tour, or, so there's other sort of indirect benefits to it. But, in terms of a direct revenue source, not too many people.
Yeah, I'm just kidding, of course. I have no interest in doing a podcast, but, I've got way too many projects going as it is and not enough time. But, it's in my wheelhouse, and so it's tempting. But, I've started to realize I can't do everything that I want to do. And when I was younger, yeah, sure. It's like, yeah, let's make a guitar that the fingerboard lights up. Yeah, let's design our own tremolo. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's make a guitar that, shoots a laser beam. Anything that you could think of, we're up for it at a certain point. And then after a while, it's like, why don't we just stick to one thing, do it really well, and, see where that takes us. I'm not interested in diversifying and trying to become a multinational or something. It's just not in the cards.
Well, the candy store is not getting smaller. That's the way I look at it. I mean, it probably we're the same in that regard. It's that there's a lot of choices. And if you're curious and you're creative and that sort of thing, there are so many things. I mean, it's just exponential. So
exactly.
It's hard to resist. I'm the same way. I've gotten to the point where I've had many things going on that, and you reach a point and say, well, okay, I don't think I can do all of these things. You got to put some things on the back burner and let them sort of burn out,
But at the same time, it's good to have a lot of different, knowledge of a lot of different areas. It's always served me well. And I'm the kind of person who wants to constantly learn. So, computer technology, check. Welding, check. Machining, check. Woodworking, check. Graphic design, check. But I never saw it as, I'm going to go to the School of Hard Knocks and learn all this stuff so that I can have this career, have a certain career. It was always, I did things that I was interested in, and I tried to really drill down and find out what was good and what was not so good in that area, how to tell good from bad. And I was, pretty good at a lot of different things because I was interested in it. But, for example, the last 2 years that I was with Fender, because they acquired the company that I was working for. And so I got to work with their Japanese people who were going around to all the factories doing the Kaizen, the lean manufacturing stuff at all their facilities. And on an academic level, it really appealed to me to look at the efficiencies that could be gained and why doing this Kaizen makeover. And we went around to the different factories down in Ensenada for Fender, the Fender Custom Shop. I worked in the Fender Custom Shop, primarily in the amp line and the team built area. It was a pretty small outfit, and so there, is all in the area of the custom shop, rebuilding certain parts of the line and making them more efficient, much to the dismay of the people in the custom shop. You come in for, a week and tear their shop apart and put it back together in what you think is a better way.
That must have gone over well.
Well, some of it did, some of it didn't. And one of the things that you learn is that you really have to get buy-in. I even hate the expressions that they use. You have to get the buy-in from at the shop level, but there are really some things that you can learn. And it was interesting to me, like I said, on a kind of academic level, it was very exciting. I would never, ever want to work in a place that had been made over like that. But, and that's kind of why my shop now kind of looks like, it looks like a little job shop. It's a artist's studio is what it is. And that's the way I like it. It's kind of the antithesis of that Kaizen thing in one way, but there's a lot of what I learned that I employ in the way that I build guitars and the way I sequence and the way things are laid out in the shop. And in fact, after I was at Fender for 2 years, the first thing that I did was I thought, well, what can I do? I don't want to make guitars. I'm going to give myself a break. So I became a consultant to, guess who? The music industry. Small builders who are, like 1 man to 5 people in a shop. They're struggling. Mm-hmm. Their wives are about to divorce them because they're not making any money. And, they did a second mortgage on their home or something to buy a router and they can't figure out why they're not making any money. So I would go into these guys and, yeah, it sounds like a lot of money, but, in just a few days, I can take a look at your operation and figure out what's going wrong here. And, and it was really interesting to me because I would go into these places, I would go into a guy's shop, and the first question is, do you know how much it costs you to make your guitar? And usually I get something like, well, the wood cost me this amount of money. I buy my pickups from Lawler and they cost this amount of money. And I get my bridges from so-and-so and they cost this amount of money. And then the knobs cost this much money. And I go, well, okay, so you know how much your raw material costs you and your hardware, but do you know how much it really costs you? And they're like, well, I don't know. I sell it for this much and I sell it for, this is how much I've got into it. And this, well, what about your sandpaper? Oh, well, that's not very much.
And do they figure overhead and their time and all that kind of stuff that has to go into?
All that stuff. And the lawyers, there will be lawyers and sandpaper and your time to go get it. And how much paint do you actually put on? How much does it cost you in paint? And what about the insurance? Oh, you don't have insurance? What happens is it burns down. Well, they say, it'll be on my home insurance because they're down in the basement. And I go, yeah, fat chance. As soon as they see you've got a business down here, then you're shooting paint and you've got wood dust and you burned your home down, you're screwed, dude. Like, you need insurance. Oh, really? And how much does it cost you to get your tools? Oh, well, I just had those. Well, don't you buy any? It just was endless. Yeah. The things they didn't think about. And then what I often say is that, anybody can make a guitar. And certainly by today, we've all recognized that because every day I find 5 new guys who've started to follow me on Instagram who are making guitars. There's like thousands and thousands of people who are making guitars in their basement. Okay, this is my 5th guitar. I'm hanging the shingle up.
Yeah.
So the problem isn't how to make a guitar, because anybody can make a guitar of reasonable quality. Because there's so many places to buy the parts. When I started, you couldn't even find somebody who sold fret wire. There was no Stumac. There was no Luthier's Mercantile. But anybody can do it, but not everybody can sell a guitar. And
make a profit on it, basically.
And that's, yeah. And can you make it? Can you make it efficiently? Do you know how much it costs? How much time do you spend on the phone with your customer? Oh, I love to talk to my customers I love to, hear what they're all about. And, they ask me all these questions and I feel, this is the customer experience. And I go, well, how much does that cost you? And they go, well, I would, I do it at night when I'm not in my workshop. I'm going, oh, great. How does the family feel about that?
What does that cost you?
They understand. So you're working 12 hours a day or 10 hours a day. 2 hours of that is on the phone or email. Oh, well, I'd be on the email anyway. I get my email and, and so the biggest thing that I would run into is people who do not value their time. They give it away and they determine how much their instrument costs based on, some internet forum that has decided that anything over $1,200 is a ripoff. So they go, well, I can't be more than $1,200 because that's a ripoff. Gibson's the king of being a ripoff. Look at, $10,000 for a guitar. That's insane. That's a cocaine habit or something that they've got over there. So they artificially lower the price of their instrument, which brings the average price of the guitars down for everybody. And all these guys, I feel sorry for them, and I've dealt with a number of them, that they're in the basement or the garage or whatever, and they've got like 20 guys or 30 guys who are, their friends, their buddies on the internet, and they buy those guitars, and then they reach the end of that, and boom, it comes down like,
I've seen so much of that. I mean,
Now you're going to have to really start marketing. Well, I'll go on the internet. I'll spend even more time on Facebook talking to people or something. Facebook, it's the great, or Instagram, it's the great savior of people who can't budget their business. That's what they think. But, they wind up spending hours and hours, that they don't get to charge back. So if you start charging back, you start charging that all into your cost of goods sold, you start to see that, I really can make a guitar that retails for $1,200, even if you sell it direct. And, and that's something I just don't want to apologize for. This is how much my guitars cost. No, I'm not doing it with a bread knife and it's very inefficient. It's pretty efficient. I've been through this for a few years, and I know how to make a guitar fairly efficient. And it's not cheap. It still takes a long time to do it the way I do it. And, I need to be paid for that.
Well, of course, I think you're also positioned in the market too, based on many, many years of at least perceived success. And I say that just as kind of jokingly, because from my standpoint, I see success. So you have something going for you that helps to bolster that price. But one of the things that I've noticed from back when I was working with a lot of small builders 10, 11 years ago, so a lot of them are still on my list, and a lot of them still have websites that are going, but they haven't built or sold a guitar in 5 years or something like that, or 7 years.
Which isn't to say that you can't do it, because we certainly did it. And, somebody like Dennis Fano has done it twice now or 3 times, and that's good, solid design, good, solid understanding of how things are done. And, being in the right place at the right time doesn't hurt either. But, there are builders out there like, Saul Cole, and, there's a lot of people are making really great work out there, and it's refreshing, and it's exciting. That's the community that I had always hoped to have. They're out there, but there are a lot of people who are just muddying the waters with, just making the same old. Not that my guitars aren't reminiscent of other guitars, because that's just the way folk music and the blues and guitar building works, right?
Exactly.
You build upon themes that other people have pioneered, or probably they've borrowed from other people. But there's just so much of it, and the prices have been kind of lowered unintentionally or intentionally lowered to a point where, if people aren't concerned about making money, then, or they don't realize that they're not making any money yet. And, that influences the market. But, I do the same talking to my clients as these guys do. I spend a lot of time emailing, talking to people on the phone, walking them through stuff, learning about them, really getting to know what they're trying to do. That's part of the experience. That's part of the fun of ordering a custom guitar and getting a guitar from me is, you're talking to the guy who built the guitars for all these rock stars. And you get to talk to me, you get to just help me design the guitar for you and make it sure it's what you want. But you have to pay for that. And that means my guitars have to cost more than, the bottom line that everybody made up, an artificially low bottom line. And I am not apologetic about it. It would be great if it was lower, but those hours are precious to me. I'm not getting any younger. I don't have a lot of time left. Yeah. So every hour is important to me.
That's exactly right.
So there you go, kids. There's the name of the game. Go find some guy who's in his 20s who thinks he's going to live forever and doesn't mind losing money and have him build you a guitar.
Yeah.
So,
But it's all about, if as long as somebody's willing to shell out the money and there's some kind of a demand for it, people want it and they'll pay for it, you've got a sale. If nobody is willing to pay, then you've got beautiful instruments. But it seems to me that isn't really an issue with what you're doing right now.
No, it's I'm lucky. I am, well, I guess you could call it lucky. I'm lucky to have persevered in this industry for 40 plus years and made enough of a name for myself, I guess, that, people will seek me out. They do feel that it's, worth being involved with that legacy and that I know how to make guitars. And it's enough that, I can continue to do it. I'm not losing money. And, it's at a level that I find comfortable. And that's all that really matters. I'm not trying to prove anything at this point. I'm not trying to, grow my business into some sort of, empire. It's just, that's not why I do this. I do this because this is who I am. This is what I do.
And this is what you love doing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
you're going to live longer as a result, by the way.
Well, that's a mixed blessing, isn't it?
Well,
but, so enough people are interested in being part of that and interfacing with me, and the product is great and the guitars sound amazing. And
they do. From what I've listened to and seen, especially in some really good demos out there. I mean, and they're beautiful instruments, and the style to me is, just has it's a little overused. But if I say simple elegance, that's certainly one way to describe them. They're just really set aside from a lot of the other instruments that you see out there. So no question that it's a unique and high quality product.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. And it's, I sweat over each individual guitar. You'd think that by now, after being involved with companies, I'm making hundreds of thousands of guitars in my lifetime, either a part of it or actually doing it or overseeing it. You would think it would be boring, but no, it's still pretty damn cool.
Well, I want to, before we kind of close out here, because we're getting into that zone right now, but I guess I wanted to, as I told you, I like to sort of end on a sort of a perspective note. And as you look out there sort of on the broader horizon for the industry in general, or the broader segment of the guitar making business, what do you see, both in terms of are there still opportunities? Are there big challenges? Do you have a sense of that at all?
I think there are always going to be opportunities for people who are forward looking and they're in touch with where music is at. I think it's, music always leads. It's not marketing that makes the music business cook. I've been in enough marketing meetings at big companies to know that the vice president of marketing thinks that it's marketing that makes the world go round, but it really isn't. They're always one or two steps behind what's really going on. So the people who are out there in the trenches, they're in touch. There are opportunities there. There are opportunities for people to just make a really great product. Great, not just for yourself. You can't make something that nobody wants, but there's always going to be a place for really high quality items. Now, in terms of whether or not the guitar is going to live or die, or it's going to be some new technological breakthrough that happens next year, I don't know. I've seen them come and seen them go, and at this point, one of the great things is that I get to see these trends come around for the third time. And you get to see the people on the internet going like it's never happened before. It's just, it's like fashion. You just keep recycling. And that's really what it is. It's the fashion business, and certainly, I have a certain look for my guitars and a certain fashion that I guess you could call it. It's my aesthetic. It's the way I grew up in guitar, what I think is important. And, I stick to that. So I think, there's always room for people who are in touch, and always in room for people who are doing really great work.
Do you see any bumps? You see any potential thorns in the side of the road?
Oh, yeah. The market is oversaturated as far as guitar building is concerned. It's oversaturated. It's like I mentioned, it's oversaturated with people who, there are good people out there. Don't get me wrong. It's like there are people who are really doing great stuff, and I see stuff and it actually kicks my ass, and I go, wow, I got to up my game. So there are people like that, but there's so many people out there who are just doing the same thing, and nobody's put a jazz guitar pickguard on a Telecaster backwards. I'm going to do that. That's going to be that's my signature.
I saw one of those just the other day. So,
you know what I mean? It's what I call a composite guitar. It's
right.
It's like a Lego guitar, basically what people are building. So, I would think that there has to be some sort of shakeout. There's like a whole generation of people, the ones who are smart, the ones who understand how to run a business and how to not screw themselves over, undersell their abilities and their capabilities, and believe in themselves. And then there are people who will just fall out of the marketplace, and they'll go back and they'll get their job. Maybe they'll work, in a marketing department at a guitar company or something, or they'll go into insurance. I don't know.
Well, you've already explained that a lot of these guys need insurance, so there's probably somebody who's wants to focus on the guitar market.
There you go. All right, everybody. There's your niche. The door is open. Make sure you're getting through that door. Insurance for small guitar builders.
Maybe that's something I need to get into because, I still have my guitarcareers.com project, which is one of these sort of incubation kind of things that's been incubating for quite a while. And I don't know if it's actually going to come out of the shell or not. But yeah, there's always stuff like that. But I guess my final thought, or whatever it is just about you, about Jol Dantzig, and what does the future look like for you, and what's important to you now and going forward?
Well, a number of different things. I want to do more of my own hardware, my own pickups, that sort of thing. I've been working with this guy, John Grail, who's actually a brilliant pickup designer and pickup builder who is, he's in his 70s and he's retired. And he was on 48th Street, like in the 60s, when Hendrix and Felix Pappalardi and all, repairing guitars, repairing pickups and electronics. in the New York area, and he builds these brilliant pickups. And, he hasn't marketed them over the years. He got out of the music industry as his main line of work. He went to work for not aerospace, but a defense contractor in the Boston area. And he was in that world because he's an electronic geek. And, he's kind of crazy. He's got a room in his house that's painted with shielding. It's a Faraday cage. So, no microwave activity, so the government can't control his brain. Too many years in the defense industry, I guess. Yeah. But he keeps trying to sell me his business. He's like, you need to buy my business. And I'm like, John, what business?
Right.
You make 15 pickups a year.
And they all go in your guitars, basically?
Yeah, well, me and there are a lot of clients that he's dealt with since the 60s, but those guys are, they're, I hate to say it, but they're dying.
Right.
They're disappearing. He was dealing with Jay Giles and he's gone. There are a lot of guys. Felix Pappalardi obviously has been gone forever. And, so, his roster is shrinking, and he's like, yeah, I'm selling you my intellectual property. Going, okay. But there's some opportunities for me, but I don't want to become a pickup maker. I don't want to go, and that's a whole nother hour of talking about the pickup industry, about, how many people are in that game. And I don't want to be another guy in that game, but I wouldn't mind being able to build stuff for myself just because I'm interested. I'm curious.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it adds a little more uniqueness to what you're doing, I suppose. Not that it's not unique already, but
yeah, but the difference is that there are people out there who are doing all this stuff, and they haven't put in their 10,000 hours. They haven't, they're just doing the same old stuff. They don't understand exactly why. This works.
That 10,000 is really a pretty good number, though. I know I've hit it at some point, and I could tell the difference. So at some point, magically, in the 10,001st hour, amazing things happened. But generally speaking, I think there's a lot to that, don't you?
Oh, yeah. You talk to Seymour Duncan, or you talk to Steve Blucher, you talk to Jason Lawler, you talk to John Grail, you talk to, the guys at Bartolini, Rob Turner. These guys know. They didn't just start doing what they're doing 3 years ago. They might have started in the basement. They might have started out like a lot of these guys, but they've been doing it a long time, and there wasn't so much competition back then, so they could thrive. Now, it's boom or bust, I guess. But there's so much competition, and it's just incredible to me. Once a week, I get approached by a new, in quotes, pickup maker who wants to send me some pickups to try on my guitar. And, I have no idea who they've, how they've learned their craft, how much they know, how much of it's just, something they saw on YouTube and now they're doing it. And it's important. It's important if you're going to build a product with integrity, a product that people can rely on. People always ask, well, why didn't you use so-and-so's pickups back in the day? Or why didn't you use this guy's pickups? How come you always stuck with Seymour Duncan, or how much you always stuck with Jason Lawler? And that's when you're building a number of guitars, you have to have consistency, especially if you're small. You get, it's a big outlay to get a bunch of pickups, and you go to put together a client's guitar. The customer is expecting that guitar, and the pickups aren't working, or they don't sound like the last set that you got because, these people don't have their processes down. You're screwed, and your customer's screwed. And so there's something to be said for dealing with people who've been in the business, who've really learned their craft. And also you could call them up and say, I've got a problem with this. And then boom, here it is. I'm going to next day it to you. I'm sorry, send it back. We'll give you credit. In fact, don't even pay for the pickup, or whatever they say, because they understand that sort of thing. But very, very rarely do you have a problem with those guys. And there's a reason for it. And it's that 10,000 hours. And for those guys, a guy like Duncan, it's, way more than 10,000 hours.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I got to tell you, certainly one of the most enjoyable interviews I've had a chance to do. And we could probably do a couple of more, and maybe we will at some point. But I really do want to thank you for taking the time, both in front of the interview and during it, and getting to know you a little bit. And so I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. I love your whole backstory. We could do a podcast. I could do. See, if I'm going to get into podcasting, I could do your podcast.
You could interview me. Okay.
Because of your background as well. So yeah, I think it was pretty good. Once I woke up, about 30 minutes into it. But.
Oh no, it's all good. It should play very well, and I'm going to look forward to speaking to you again and staying in touch.
Will do. Awesome. All right, Jeff. It's been a pleasure.
By the way, did you know that you could become an official show sponsor of GBR, business or professional, for as little as $2 a month? It's possible you didn't know that because we just recently launched the program, but the value proposition is quite simple. If you like what we're doing and you get value from what we do, then you can become an official show sponsor at a variety of levels. And while you'll still continue to get the original value from GBR, as an official show sponsor, you'll get even more benefits, which are pretty cool if I do say so myself. But you can find out more by clicking any one of the official show sponsor links on our website at guitarbusinessradio.com. They're all over the place, so you shouldn't have any problem. So what did you think of our interview with Jol Dantzig? We always want to hear from you. You can do that easily through the official episode page on our website at guitarbusinessradio.com or on Facebook and Twitter at Guitar Business. Email us directly at contact@guitarbusinessradio.com. And of course, none of that works for you. Just call our GBR hotline at 888-777-2404. You can do that right now if you like, or later. Operators are busy debating the news of the day. If you call right now, they can get onto something much more productive. So I thought this was a great interview. I mean, I say that a lot, I guess, and that just means we're very fortunate to attract a lot of people on the show who have great stories to tell, knowledge to share, and moments to inspire us. But what was different about this interview for me personally was, well, I saw a lot of parallels and similarities between Jol's career and my own. Of course, I've not built any guitars, but I've done other things that I suppose could be substituted and still have the similar overall experience. I guess how I might describe that is basically the idea of following a creative, professional path that's connected with a common thread. And the thing is, it's often hard for us to understand any of that until we're far enough down the road to be able to look back and, sort of connect the dots. But it's an interesting process, and I've found that it can actually give a lot more meaning to what we've done with our lives. Not being able to see that along the way can sometimes cause us to question our path or doubt our progress, and, well, in the worst case scenario, cause us to make what ultimately turn out to be not the best of decisions. Now, I only started thinking about this maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and over time I've become much more comfortable with what I've done overall. It all has more meaning to me now, but I had many questions along the way that resulted in discouraging moments. I gave up on a lot of things, sometimes prematurely, and moved on in completely different directions, thinking that, well, that's what I needed to do. I certainly didn't understand what my common thread or threads were. I didn't care. I had no idea what my purpose was or why I was doing anything when my abrupt changes were based purely on the need to put food on the table or pay the rent and, a few other things. But that's pretty normal, I guess. I think the truth, however, is that most of us go through all kinds of ups and downs throughout our lives. Even those who appear to have been very successful, with appear being the operative word there, even those people most likely had a roller coaster-like experience in one form or another. I think that's the human experience, if you will. But if you've been a working adult for a decade or two or more, regardless of where you are now, you can stop and take the time to examine from where you've come. and connect some dots and find that common thread for yourself. It's obviously going to be different for each of us, but I would suggest to you that if you can do that, and it may take some time, that at the point you clearly recognize the thread, your view of your own life will change. And even more important, it will change how you see your future and what you do in the future. Like I said, it's different for everybody, but that realization may result in a somewhat subtle change all the way to a so-called aha moment. But whatever it is for you, it won't happen unless and until you ask the question and think about the answer. If you have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them. And while you're engaging in that activity, remember to stay positive, stay focused on your destination, but don't be self-limiting. Keep all the options open on how you're going to get there. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week on episode 77. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.